The comparisons to the 1930s aren't overblown. They're overdue. What made National Socialism possible wasn't a single moment of collapse. It was the steady erosion of democratic norms, often through seemingly minor legal changes that just accumulated over time. And it was the capture of the state by nationalists, the weaponization of law and language over the course of the 30s, like the stab in the back myth or their redefinition of patriotism. And then the willingness of the political and professional class to look away so as long as their own lives continued uninterrupted. I'm comfortable. Look, that family just disappeared. What time is the football match on? The propaganda was framed as patriotism, policing as national protection, mass exclusion and detention justified in the name of order. But resistance, it's a weird thing, resistance is, right? As opposed to protest, as opposed to even organized opposition, it emerged throughout Europe and the Nordics at different places and at different times. It didn't emerge from clarity, that's for damn sure. It largely emerged from failure, from the realization that courts wouldn't save them, that elections had already been undermined, that public opinion had been reshaped by fear and repetition. And I guess more to the point, that too many of their fellow citizens actually agreed with the fascists and the window to act had already closed. That was a hell of a wake-up call for some people. And Americans, as I am learning increasingly, flinch at this vocabulary. They don't want to hear the word fascism. They don't want to hear Nazi. They've been trained to think it's hyperbole. But it's that discomfort, moral, rhetorical, well, even aesthetic, that's helped dull our ability to recognize the reality that's right in front of us. This isn't about labels. It's about understanding that there's a deep, what we call a historical grammar of authoritarian movements, which often share structural similarities, even across all of these very different contexts. I mean, if you want an example of this, think about the conversation about whether or not those people had actually given Nazi salutes. No, they were Roman salutes. Failure to call it out. And that's a difference here. Europeans who lived through the Cold War or whose parents lived through fascism aren't afraid to name what they see. They're not playing games. They've built civic cultures, flawed, yeah, but alert to the warning signs. They've institutionalized memory, not romanticized it. They know how hard democracy is to build and how easily it's lost. The United States has no such tradition. It has no labor movement to speak of today, no organized left with reach, or even coherent ideology. It has no culture rooted in historical memory. There is something of a protest culture, but as my book points out, that's not the same thing. Our narratives, especially around the founding and our major conflicts, have consistently downplayed internal contradictions and inconvenient truths. And so it fosters this sense of exceptionalism that makes us uniquely vulnerable. And it fuels the fact that liberal institutions, media, the courts, political parties, even worse, are just too aligned with nationalist aims. It's not because they support authoritarianism, I'm not saying that, but because they don't really see how it's emerged from our own history and our own institutions. They think it's been imposed somehow from the outside, that it's not natural, that something is not something that's been a part of the United States from the very beginning. It's very much American. And that's why historians of resistance and authoritarianism have to be part of this moment. They have to rise to this challenge. And they have to pivot into it if they're from related fields. I came to it from the American Revolution, for crying out loud. Not to draw cheap analogies, though, or play games of pick-me, but to help people understand where we are, what's different, and what demands action. So that's why you need to follow Abby Heffer and Karen Cox and memorial sites like Neuengamme and Mauthausen and the Anne Frank Youth Network. And if you know of others, drop them below. Because this isn't just about understanding the past, it's about recognizing that we're living in one of those moments, the kind that historians write about later. And if we're lucky, it'll be the kind where someone saw it coming and said so.